Good morning, hello everybody, and welcome to today's science lesson. So, very fun lesson today. Hopefully, you all put your water balloons in the freezer yesterday and ready for today. And I'll show you what we're going to do with them in a moment. Okay, but first of all, Mr. Lake, what do you see here?
Ooh. Looks like, I don't know, some kind of frozen ice of some sort, Mr. Fenn.
Absolutely, and we call this is an iceberg. Okay, now if you could just get the globe for me, Mr. Lake. So icebergs are they're chunks of ice that float around in the seas and the oceans. Now, we only really find them in very cold places. So we might find them up the top here in the northern hemisphere, very near sort of where the Arctic Ocean is. So you might see them kind of around here.
Yeah, and you'll remember hopefully from last week's video about oceans.
Yeah.
Arctic Ocean, very cold, lots of it covered in patches of ice. So
and you can see them maybe up here, very far north. You're unlikely to see them in the middle here where the equator is. They really are going to be quite far north where there's lots of ice, where it's very cold.
Yeah.
Now there's another place you might see them. Can you guess where that would be, Mr. Lake?
Would it be the Southern Ocean?
Yeah, if we went very far south, sort of near where Antarctica is, where it's very cold, very far away from the equator, and they'd be floating around there in the ocean. Okay, so an iceberg. Now, icebergs, I'm just going to give you a little mini lesson about icebergs. Now, icebergs, this is what an iceberg might look like. Now, as you will see, there's a lot more under the water than there is on top. On top of the water, they might look not very big, but they could be truly enormous.
It's a saying, isn't it? You hear people say the tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because there's so much under.
Absolutely. Now, next one. So, I don't know how well you can see that actually, but if you remember our work on fractions, so if you think about this, so about 1/9, so one bit out of, if you were to split that iceberg into 9 bits, only one bit would be on top, and then you'd have underneath this bit here, that's about 8 bits out of the 9, 8/9. So most of it is under the water.
That's a lot more.
A lot more, okay? Now, icebergs are formed, okay, by these things called glaciers. So, if you hold the globe up, please, in the very north or the very south, where it's very cold, you might get somewhere like here, Greenland, which is a very cold place. You might, somewhere like that, where you get, over a long time, you get lots of snow falling, and then some more snow falls, and then some more, and it makes these big, sort of icy, snowy blocks. And over time, these glaciers, they actually move. They move just a little bit, then a little bit more, and over a long period of time, you can see they sort of start to slip into the ocean, okay, until eventually you'll get pieces, a chunk might break off, and that bit is going to float and become our icebergs, which will then float around in the northern or the very southern oceans. Okay, and here we go. So here you can see our icebergs. Okay, now an interesting thing about icebergs, Mr. Lake, is that they're always, quite often you see them bubbling.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's because the way they're made over years and years and years, with that snow falling, then more snow, you get like pockets of air in it. So as it sort of slowly melts in the sea, that air escapes and makes little bubbles.
Oh, wow.
So if you got near an iceberg, you might see some fizzing, okay? Now, icebergs, to give you an idea of the size of real icebergs, right? This iceberg here is about the size of a car. That's probably actually the smallest iceberg.
Wow.
The smallest iceberg's about the size of a floating car, and they've got a very cool name. They are called growlers.
Growlers?
Yes, very nice, okay. Now these icebergs can be particularly dangerous for ships, okay? Because you think, especially Mr. Lake said, the tip of the iceberg. If a ship's, sailing along, it might just see this little tiny bit there, and it looks like it's just a little bit of snow,
Like an ice cube.
It's like an ice cube. Who cares? But underneath, it could be a big chunk of hard rock there, ice.
Quite sharp as well.
Quite sharp,
Yeah.
hard like rock, and if it hits the side of a ship, it could dent the ship and cause a lot of damage, maybe even sinking, something like that. So ships need to be really careful when sailing at the very north of the Earth or the very south, and watch out for icebergs.
Yeah, and I guess it's hard to tell how big they are when you're only seeing the tip of it.
Absolutely.
You don't know how much underneath there
You
is.
can't see it. Yeah. Okay. Now, I've told you about the smallest iceberg. Now, this I've tried to show you what some of the biggest icebergs might look like, because let's face it, that's more
It's
interesting.
more interesting.
Now, to give you some idea, okay, here's an iceberg, right? You've got the little bit on the top, you've got most of it under the water. Just that bit under the water is the same size as, imagine a really tall building, right?
Yeah.
If you think about, I don't know, your house where
Yeah.
you live,
Mm-hmm.
how many floors are in your house?
It's 2 stories, 2 floors.
2 floors, right? Well, this building would be 27 stories high.
Wow.
So imagine there's 27 different floors in your house.
Mm-hmm.
Really, we don't really have buildings that tall in Ipswich.
No, I guess you've got the wine rack now, haven't you? That's
Wine rack, yeah.
on the waterfront.
There's a lot more of them in places like London, but
Yeah.
really tall building.
Yeah, think of it like a tall London building. I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah.
So that's how deep it goes under
Underneath.
water. Okay, so they're enormous things. Okay, and it's quite amazing because they're made of, because the water in the ocean is salt water, right? But then the icebergs are made from fresh water,
yeah.
the snow and the ice. Okay, so when they melt, obviously it's very cold, but then you get this sort of it's quite neat. You get loads of life there. You get lots of
Yeah.
different fish,
Mhm.
dolphins, maybe penguins come, all sorts of sea creatures. They like the fresh water, the different temperature. So there's usually, apart from all those bubbles, there's lots of life around an iceberg. Okay. Now, of course, today you are going to be making your own iceberg. Okay. Now I have here the instructions which will be in your pack for you. Okay, but if we just turn now, I'm going to show you roughly what to do. Okay, so ready, Mr. Lake?
Yep.
Right, so if you have a clear bowl, that is great, but if not, it will work in any kind of bowl. So here's my clear bowl full of water. Now I've put lots of salt in there, okay, to make it just like the sea, salt water, right? And if I just check on my instruction, it says 5 to 10 tablespoons of salt. Okay, so you want to put quite a bit of salt in there. Okay, now here is obviously the water balloon from yesterday, which I've frozen. Now, really, I should really be wearing gloves. I'm sorry, I'm not. I just forgot them. Okay, and then, but maybe you need some scissors just to snip it, and then you can just pull this bit off. Make sure you have an adult helping you. Okay, because the ice can stick to your hands, which could be very painful. So an adult does need to help you with this. Okay, all I want you to do, okay, is just observe it. That's the scientific skill. Observe it, watch it, get down here. What can you see? What's noticeable? Yeah, have a look at it. How long is it going to take before it melts? Okay, just watch what happens. Okay. And then, what I want you to do today, you have some choices. The main skill is observing, but if you want to, you could draw a picture of what it looks like. You could do you could do like a little poster about icebergs. You could maybe draw it, what it looks like with most of it under the water. Tell me a few facts about icebergs. You could find out your own facts. You could do that. You could, if you wanted to, you could just, I'm absolutely happy just to talk to someone at home about this. Talk about what you notice. What can you see? What have you learnt about icebergs? Okay, so really have fun with this. The main activity is just watching it, seeing what it looks like. What do you notice? If you want to make a nice poster about icebergs, please do. If you want to just talk about it, that's great too. So I hope you have fun with this, and yeah, please enjoy.